You are listening to Rouge Radio, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
It's time to get the point as Rouge Radio is ready to kick off.
Ready!
The best football talk with the best in the business.
So what is the cost? You have 2 first-round picks this year because the Argos are dumb enough to trade for Drew Willie.
A few rookies.
We go directly to the on-field product. We welcome to the show the 20th overall pick in this past Sunday's CFL draft, DeAndre Wright of the Alouettes. DeAndre, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
And the occasional Hall of Famer.
Please welcome Doug Brown, who is one of the members of the current class of 2016 in the CFL Hall of Fame. Doug, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, guys, for the kind words and for having me on the program.
Rouge Radio is on the air. Here's your hosts, Robert Dalton and Tony Allen.
And we are back for another edition of the Rouge Radio podcast powered by the Canadian Football Podcast Network. My name is Robert Dalton, and joining me, as always, Mr. Tony Allen. This is episode 516. We are sponsored by the good people at Manscaped. Go to manscaped.com, enter the promo code Rouge. You get 20% off your discount, or 20% discount off your order, and you get free worldwide shipping. Go to Manscaped. Your balls, oh, they will definitely thank you. Tony, how's it going, my man?
It's going pretty good. Pretty good. It's cold and snowy, but still pretty good.
Oh yeah, it is. You know what's weird is it's weird. I'm not too sure how it is in your neck of the woods. At one point, it's like minus 40 with the wind chill, and it's like
not that
just
bad.
You just do not want to go outside. And then and like a few days later, it's like +1. I'm like, how does that work?
Yeah.
Do we have
Weird
any,
weather.
Yeah, it is. Do we have any like meteorologists that that are listening to the show? I had a dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a dream. So someone was calling me names, and then I went out and shot them. And then yeah. So in my dream, that we had the quick Canadian justice system where went to trial, was found guilty, sentence, and then my family released a statement saying that we are with Mr. Robert Dalton. It didn't happen. I was kind of hoping. I'm looking at you, and I was kind of hoping that you would jump on board and go off on the Edmonton Oilers and Connor McDavid.
Oh.
That was my lead-in. That was my attempt to get you all riled up, and I failed.
Yeah, no, I tried. It took me a while to click in. I'm like, oh, is he making a reference about the Edmonton Oilers? But no, that whole thing is so ridiculous. Like, I was even reading stuff this morning about will Connor Garland answer the bell and stuff. I'm like, for what?
For getting cross-checked?
Like, what did he do? Like, I mean, all Connor, he didn't do anything. Like, oh, but he should have been called for a penalty. But that's not his fault. Like, he's mugging Connor McDavid. So? Like, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, I would not be angry if a Calgary Flame did that to McDavid in a playoff series and didn't get called for it. We'd have a parade for him. Nobody would be calling for his head. Like, that was that whole reaction to McDavid was about the worst you could handle it on every single level, from Edmonton media to the Edmonton Hockey Club. It's like you cross-checked a guy in the face. What about Tyler Myers? Who cares about Tyler Myers?
Yeah.
McDavid cross-checked a guy in the face, and he gets suspended for it. Like, just take it and move on. You're not the first person to ever get suspended in the NHL, and I don't care about the NHL's wheel of justice. I don't care what Austin Matthews got years ago when he cross-checked somebody in the neck. Like, I don't care. It doesn't change the fact that you cross-check somebody in the face. And I'm like, people are talking about how the NHL has let McDavid down and the NHL has led to this. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I grew up and had to live through the clutch and grab era of hockey, which was probably the worst era of hockey. I mean, it got to the Flames to the Stanley Cup because, I mean, nobody knew how to prevent hockey from happening better than Daryl Sutter did. Everyone thinks Daryl Sutter was smart at hockey. He wasn't. He was smart at making sure a hockey game was never played. That was the 2004 Calgary Flames in a nutshell. Don't let 30 seconds of consecutive hockey be played in that entire game. So like, it's just in that era, and I never remembered Forsberg cross-checking people in the mouth. I don't remember Yzerman cross-checking people in the mouth. I don't remember Lemieux cross-checking people in the face and blaming hockey for not protecting them. Like, the whole thing is asinine.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's okay for you to be like, okay, good, Connor Garland. I mean, this isn't an opinion of Connor Garland didn't deserve it, right? Like, we're not saying that Connor Garland should have got something. It was the fact that, okay, Connor McDavid had enough of it and cross-checked the guy. Okay, fine.
Yeah. Who cares?
If you're
Isn't
gonna
that
do
what
that,
you're supposed to love about hockey? The toughness.
exactly.
Isn't that the hockey code?
Yeah, we have codes like, you hit a guy legally, so you got to go rough him up a little bit, get an instigator roll, go on a penalty kill, and get scored on because the code. Like, I don't understand.
But all the lead up to it too was like, oh, how are the Oilers going to react to Connor Garland? Like,
no, that's his name, Connor McGarland. Now, yeah. That's his name, Connor McGarland.
Yeah, like all his crime was getting McDavid kicked out of the game, and that's huge. Like, I want Garland to teach the Calgary Flames how to do that to McDavid. Like, the guy's a hero. Like, he pulled it off and he didn't get called for it. Like, I don't know. It is so stupid. I can't even wrap my head around it. And people talk about the CFL being so CFL-y, and meanwhile, the sport that is the country we love the most just had its superstar do something stupid, and we blamed the victim for it. Like, it was his fault. Like everybody in the NHL from the commissioner down was responsible for McDavid cross-checking him in the head, except Connor McDavid.
Yeah,
I've never seen anything more asinine in hockey. Like, so embarrassing. It's every year the NHL has the one absolutely ridiculous, unjustifiable outrage, from shooting a puck into an empty net too hard, and now I think that was last year's, and this year is all I could think of was that one meme. I don't know the actor, but I know he's well known. But in the top cell of the picture, he's turning around, shooting somebody in a chair, and then he turns around and says, like, how could Connor Garland make me do this? Or how could Connor Garland do this, right? Like McDavid. It's just like McDavid over there shooting somebody, and like, how could Connor Garland make me do this? Like, or how could the state of hockey make McDavid do this? Like, it's so stupid.
And I understand the premise of like, well, this is what the NHL created, and they're right. It still doesn't make Connor McDavid off the hook. Like, you could say, well, this is why he did it. He's not a bad guy. Yeah, that's not the point. The point is that he cross-checked the guy. And I mean, you could make an argument that Tyler Myers should have gotten one more game because there was no really big lead up to that cross-check. But I digress. Vancouver media didn't go off or Vancouver Canucks didn't release a statement, and then the Vancouver media whined about it. But that's on me. Or that's. I mean, when we start the hockey version of this podcast, which we pretty much have already alienated our football fans. I don't know if you noticed. We got some new glasses.
Oh, there you go. Good for you. Welcome to the club.
Yeah. You're a Simpsons fan. We're a Simpsons fanatic podcast too, as well.
Yeah, we love to reference
Simpsons knowledge. Yeah. What was the Simpsons clip that entered my mind when I first put on the glasses?
Simpsons.
Yeah.
Was it the one with Milhouse?
Oh, yeah.
Nerd.
It is. Yeah.
Nerd.
Well, it's. Okay. All right. So it wasn't that one. My the one that I was going for was I can't remember what episode it was, but it was Bart going, it's like, oh, I didn't figure that out, but I did tip off the feds about the whereabouts of my good
Oh,
friend.
yeah.
Yours. And he's at the end of that little water tunnel, like the fugitive,
From
and
The
he dives
Fugitive.
off. Yeah. And then he dives off, hits the wind, and then all of a sudden, my glasses. I don't know. That's the first thing that popped into my mind. We've got a great show. We've got a lined up. Obviously, as if you're listening to this, you already know what we're going to be talking about. But before we do that, let's get to this week's. I guess it's not this week because it's been a while since we've done it. Global Rouge 2.0. I guess no, it's just Global Rouge, where we list off the list of cities and countries that are listening to the Rouge Radio podcast. I don't actually get the stats through YouTube if there is that availability, but here it is. Here are the top countries that are listening to the Rouge Radio podcast. We've got your Canada, United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Switzerland, Australia, France, Brazil, Cuba, and Ireland. And I'm still insisting that it's not a real person in Australia. It's just one big spider that's listening to us. Top cities: Winnipeg, Edmonton, Eastman, Quebec, Frankfurt, Lethbridge, Burnaby, BC, Regina, Saskatchewan, Medicine Hat, as well as St. Albert, Alberta, and Montreal, Quebec. Those are the top listeners of the Rouge Radio podcast. We love all our listeners. Although I'm certain that one from Regina is actually from Pence, but
Yeah.
well, we won't talk further about that. I got to stop that drum solo. Now that we've updated this little broadcast booth that I have here, everything that's coming through my headphones actually just sounds completely weird. Let's go to some major off-season news. The Saskatchewan Roughriders signed or hired Andrew Harris as their running back coach. I don't know if we want to talk too much about that, or do we want to talk about the social media fighting between Bomber and Rider fans, because
I think it's all connected.
It's all connected, and it's funny. And for someone like myself, I just like to sit back, that little Michael Jackson popcorn gift, to sit back and then watch it all unfold, because when it happened, everything, you get the Bomber fans, and not all. And then again, I don't want to paintbrush, but it is kind of funny how it is kind of stereotypical. You get some Bomber fans who all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, you're dead to me. And some of it was tongue in cheek, but you get the feeling that a lot of people they meant what they said. And then they retract their support from him when he was caught with a banned substance back 5 years ago. And then you get some Rider fans who are, wait, okay, that stuff that we just completely that we brought up every time his name was mentioned. Oh yeah, it was just a one-time thing. We're not going to talk about it now.
Yeah.
So it is funny how that kind of happens. My opinion on that has never changed. We talked about it in the last or not on the last podcast, but one of the podcasts prior to last year's end. And I'm not going to really go further into this. Did Andrew Harris intentionally take a banned substance? My opinion has always been no. He was in the league up to 9-10 years, and he's probably been tested multiple times throughout that span, and that was his first occurrence. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but my opinion still remains. He is 100% responsible for what he puts in his body, whether or not he believes it was tainted or whatnot. He is still responsible to make sure that's dietary, vitamins, supplements, the list goes on and on. He is ultimately responsible. But aside from rehashing, this is a pretty decent move by Corey Mason and the Riders, is not?
Yeah, no, if his playing smarts translates into coaching smarts, Saskatchewan definitely has a winner there. I think what might have triggered, if I'm a Bombers fan, what would trigger me too is how did he slip through our fingers? Is there no way we could have added him to our coaching staff if he was looking to stick around in Winnipeg? Or I mean, maybe they just offered him more in Regina. I'm not going to lie. I don't really know what Harris has been doing with his time away from football, but I mean, I know it's a rough look, but I mean, I mean, having seen Terry Vaughn go from Calgary to Edmonton, I mean, I've seen the worst
That
of the
was
rivalry.
that was as a player, though, right? I
Yeah,
mean, this is
which
as a
I think
coach.
is far worse than a coach. Like when it comes to the rivalries, I've seen it from the players, and to be like, honestly, Weston Dressler going from the Riders to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers would have been 100 times worse than just Andrew Harris going to be part of the coaching staff. Like I think that was a little bit too much. I think you could have made your jokes, but I mean, he's joining a coaching staff. To me, it's not the same thing. Like he doesn't know what's happening over there in Winnipeg anymore. That he could go over and share secrets. We can have his opinions on the players. The Saskatchewan Roughriders. I mean, I know you were a little bit nicer to them than I was because I kind of said the BC Lions and the BC and Saskatchewan were kind of like the best of the worst when it came to the playoffs. Like one of the teams will win because they can't lose, and they won't win because they're a great football team or a dominant football team. Like they were both, but like Saskatchewan has a long way to go. And honestly, if it wasn't for how horrible Calgary was, Saskatchewan could have been in a lot of trouble if Calgary was actually decent last year. So Andrew Harris can't come in and turn that football team around. I mean, player personnel can turn the team around, or, if Calgary continues to be as bad as they were, because as much as the NFL pedigree of our quarterbacks are right now, and actually, I guess as far as, Vernon Adams goes, who knows if Dave Dickinson, again, who's to me is where your real problem was, how he's going to turn that around. I mean, Saskatchewan still has a long way to go, but their coaching staff looks a lot better now than it did last season.
Yeah, and I know they lost J.C. Sherritt, but I think predominantly they're running it back. I'm not too sure if that's the best way to go, but whenever you add a great pedigree, regardless if he has any coaching experience or at the professional level or not, is you're adding experience, right? You're not adding the guy who's coming straight from college football, who's coached a couple. You're adding the guy who's not far removed. I mean, I think he maybe even retired last year, right? After the 2023. I think he played a couple of games in 2023, but he retired after that year, so he's not far removed. So if you're a Saskatchewan Roughriders fan, you got to love this move just because it adds that playoff experience, not only in the locker room but on the sidelines as well. And he has a history with AJ Ouellette in Toronto when they played next to each other for a couple of years. I don't know if that's going to add to AJ's, few yards per carry as he's had for the last couple of years, but playing off each other, bumping ideas off each other. I don't see this as a bad thing. I'm not convinced that this is going to be the be all end all as far as that's going to be what the Riders need just to get them over the hump. But it's not something that's going to hurt the Riders to say the least.
And if Wayne Gretzky taught us anything, being the best at your sport doesn't mean you're any good at coaching it.
Oh God, I don't know what it was, but I just thought about that. It's like, oh,
Gretzky
wait a minute.
in Phoenix was so horrible. I think people just have like blocked it from their memories on how horrible of a head coach Wayne Gretzky was. And this is what would some consider the greatest man to ever play the game, but behind the bench and teaching other people how to play it, useless.
It was like 7 years removed from when he retired. So that's not too far removed from his hockey career. Let's go to the province to the west, in Alberta, because there's a couple of things that are bumping up through there. But most notably, Ed Hervey made the cause some waves I don't have an issue per se with this, but this does provide a huge domino effect potentially. Ed Hervey said that there's no way that he's going to pay top receiver Eugene Lewis $300,000 just because it's just, his stats just hasn't warranted. And I appreciate his honesty with that one, his candor. And he's also not wrong. I mean, Eugene Lewis, you could argue, is the best receiver in the CFL, and if not, top 3, hands down. But when you're running a team like the Edmonton Elks, you've missed the playoffs the last 2 years with the best receiver at the highest paid receiver. Something's got to give. You might want to just go back and wonder, should we really be paying a top dollar for a receiver when we have higher issues elsewhere? And I think that's what pretty much Ed Hervey has been saying. But this does provide, like I said, the domino effect. You want to venture a guess? Where does Eugene Lewis end up through free agency? Because we're only like 2 weeks away prior to the legal tampering window.
Yeah, I could see him landing. I would pick BC or Montreal would be the 2 places I would pick. And then obviously Toronto is always in on everything, so that should be my number 1 answer. But for some reason, just as a blind ranking, if you will, with you throwing the name out and not being prepared for that question, for some reason those were the 2 teams that popped in my head based on that question.
It will be interesting because there are a lot of there's a lot of teams that could use a big name like that. I'm going to throw up the Ottawa Red Blacks.
Oh, that would be nice.
They just locked in Drew Brown for an extension, which I love that move because I don't know if I said this on the show, but I've definitely said it out loud. I'm under the impression that Winnipeg was going to ride the Zach Collaros train until he retired after the 2025. And it's not set in stone, but I believe that's going to be the situation, especially if Winnipeg ends up taking it all this year. And then they reacquire through free agency Drew Brown, and Ottawa says, "F that. We're making sure that this guy, the reason that Drew Brown is going to be in Ottawa is by trade, and that's not going to happen." So I love that move.
I know I want to swing it back to Edmonton from the standpoint just because that was on our agenda, and I was ready to not go on a rant, but at least kind of share my thoughts when I read the quote and stuff. And I like Ed Hervey's priorities because you do have a lot of areas that you could allocate that money to make yourself better. I don't like how Ed Hervey openly handled the situation. When you've got a team like the Edmonton Elks that have been trying so hard for the last 3 years to improve an image, to turn around a mentality there, and so far up to this point, from a PR perspective, you've done very well. You brought in an owner that seems to be likable. You've just committed to the quarterback that all the fans wanted you to commit to. You're starting to improve. You're starting to win games. You just brought in a very likable and a very sought-after head coach around the Canadian Football League. Everything is so positive, and I think right now is just such a bad time for Ed Hervey's kind of open attitude towards things, to be calling out a player like that, like, listen, you're great, blah, blah, blah. There's no way in hell I'm paying you $300,000. I don't like how that sits. And honestly, he's probably right. As a receiver, that's a tough play for Eugene Lewis to try to play, because out of every position on the field, the receiver's probably the easiest for Winnipeg or for Edmonton to replace you at. Even just scouting the US. Like, if you had been I think even like a really good lineman or a defensive lineman, somewhere on the defense, or even if you'd been a running back, you could probably dig your heels in a little bit more and play like Edmonton can replace you pretty easily. It's amazing he is. I'm not saying he doesn't make Edmonton better. That's a position at receiver that you can be replaced at the easiest. So you've made it even easier for Ed Hervey to not want to bring you back because he probably feels he can bring in a replacement for you right there. And especially when you've got Dalton Schoen that makes less than you. And, yeah, a little bit too much money. I just don't like, with everything Edmonton's doing on such a positive note, I don't think it's necessary. Like Ed Hervey's attitude right now is not what Edmonton needs, and they're not going to get better by playing this. I got the biggest wang in town, and I don't care about players' feelings. I don't care about this. It's an attitude that I think doesn't mix well with the overall image Edmonton has been trying to push out in the last couple of years. Kind of like we're about the community, we're this, we like this, everyone's happy, we're a team, we're turning around, and then Ed Hervey coming in and just telling everybody to pound sand and it's my way or the highway kind of attitude. I don't like that. I'm not, and is he wrong? Whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
I just don't like it.
Yeah, we're not discussing the validity of his statement as to whether or not he should have made it. And
honestly, I think I was pretty clear that the advantage goes to Ed Hervey in that situation. I think I made it pretty clear that I feel like Lewis probably made the error in that one. And if he smartens up, re-sign when free agency starts for something respectable.
And I caught you on Twitter. I think it might have been Twitter. Is something that you said that the Washington Commanders went woke, and now they won their first playoff game in a while. And so the Edmonton Elks, they've run out of excuses. They went private. They cleaned house. They've they got a new coach from Alberta. And now that Washington went woke and won a playoff game and is close to this, are they still alive? I don't follow.
Yeah, they are. They're in the NFC Championship for the first time in 33 years.
Yeah, so there is that. So Edmonton.
And the thing is, do you think the windows in the Washington Commanders team store are boarded up because they can't sell their woke Commander jerseys and shirts? I'm going to imagine retail sales are doing just fine at the Washington Commanders team store right now. And if the Elks do it too, and they go to a West Final, or they find themselves in the Grey Cup, I don't think the sales of woke Edmonton Elks merchandise is going to suffer. And I think you're going to if Edmonton opens up 5-3, let's not get ridiculous, but let's be positive. 5-2, 6-3, whatever, 6-2, they're going to come back to Commonwealth Stadium because I don't know, that whole I'm digging my heels in and I'm not going to a team I supported for 30 years because they're not this name anymore. I still don't wrap my head around it. Like, even if the Stampeders change their name tomorrow, I would be confused. I'd be like, why? This is going to be an adjustment. But I am a grown man, and I would move. There's worse things in my life than if the Stamps weren't the Stamps anymore after 70, 80 years.
Speaking of the Elks, I wanted to talk about, obviously I mentioned their new head coach. And I've been trying to find the video and the audio of Mark Killam.
I got the quote here because somebody asked him in an interview about how he felt or how it came about that he was apparently the fall guy for the Calgary Stampeders season. And he said, I don't know. That is going to be someone you have to ask the Calgary Stampeders about. Then goes on to say, I'm going to effing bring it in Edmonton. I can tell you that right now. You can print that. And I just love it. Just the big middle fingers to the Stampeder, and basically the whole league is, I am here. I am in Edmonton now, and he is gonna effing bring it. I can tell. And I love, the best part is that, and you can print that.
I've been trying my best to try to find out. I'm not too sure if it just got removed or if I'm not looking correctly. But yeah, when I heard that, I was like, that's going to be like what Saskatchewan thought that they were last year, and I'm to the point that they were. I think that there's going to be whatever roster that they construct, they're going to want to run through walls for this guy, and whether or not that'll be successful remains to be seen. But it's definitely a positive sign for the Edmonton Elks and new head coach Mark Killam. Speaking of the Calgary Stampeders, they have the first overall pick, and now, as if you're new to Twitter or if you're new to social media in regards to CFL, the Scouting Bureau has released all these all the new players are who are eligible for the 2025 CFL draft that'll happen in May. One notable is Curtis Rourke. I am of the belief Curtis Rourke is not going to see a CFL field. That's my opinion. So does Calgary, what do they do? Like, what do they do with that first overall pick? Because this is like new grounds for Calgary. Usually if they ended up with a top 3 pick, it's because they ended up trading, right? So they traded someone to get there. This is because, like, when's the last time Calgary had the first over? Like 2003?
Yeah.
And I can't remember who they picked with that pick.
Yeah. This one is something that I have been like, it's not so much about who Calgary is going to pick with number 1. What I am kind of locked on is, do you take Curtis Rourke? Because the thing is, I don't think Curtis Rourke is going to get a fair shot in the NFL. I don't see it happening. I think Rourke is going to get drafted into the NFL. He is going to try, and in 3 years, Curtis Rourke is back in Canada. Like, I don't think he's going to make it there. I just don't. And I mean, part of it is political, but not the whole political, what you think I mean with Canada and US right now. I think it's political just in the NFL. Now, he's got the size. He's bigger than your average American quarterback. He's heavier than your average American quarterback. I just don't think he gets a genuine look. If anything, he will get bypassed, come back to Canada, and if he makes it, he's going to make it on a second go around. And I'm not trying to say he's not going to make it because he's not good enough. I think a lot of the players that get overlooked for the NFL are good enough, but they need to come to Canada because they didn't fit a particular mold. And whoever takes them, I don't think it's going to happen, because I also don't think he's got the hype and the backing of American media behind him and the American hype machine to push him into the NFL. But I think he's going to be there for 3 years. So my big hang up is, you've got Vernon Adams now for the time being. Are the Calgary Stampeders in a situation where they can burn that pick to get Curtis Rourke, and at least you have access to him when it's over? Or is everyone going to think like you did, we're never going to see Curtis Rourke, and he's going to be available much later in the draft? Is someone going to jump in there and try and hoop you? Is somebody going to be in the same mentality? In 3 years, we're going to need a quarterback. All of a sudden, let's say the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Listen, in 2025, we're just going to have to at the end of 25, 26, we're just going to have to let Caleros go. And we're going to need a quarterback for the future. Curtis Rourke can succeed in the Canadian Football League. So is Winnipeg going to jump on him in the second round, the third round? Obviously, I'm not trying to pick on Winnipeg because you're here looking at me, but this is the thing that kind of like strategically, what's the best way to play this? Because you can argue to me that Calgary can make this pick for the future and guarantee that they have him. But is there a need to take him at first overall? Is someone going to make a knee-jerk reaction? Are you going to have Montreal down at the bottom of the draft or Toronto down at the bottom of the draft thinking, holy crap, we didn't think he was going to be here. Let's take him. Like, is Dave Dickinson have enough friends in football to say, can we let this, will you guys let this guy go through the second round for us so I don't have to burn a first overall pick? To which most GMs will be like, pound sand. If he's there, I'm taking him, you know? So this is my struggle. And I presented this to you in the text chat when we were coming up with topics, and maybe you added it thinking, okay, let's see what Tony says, yes or no. And I don't. I just wanted it to be to talked about. Is it? And again, I'm too close to the team to just say, no, screw it. He's not going to make it. Get rid of him. Pass on him. Let's build a team. Let's trade it away or something like that, and somebody else down the road. So to me, there is merit to taking him first overall. What do you think? Just because you don't have to live with the consequences of it.
I don't know if he is going to be first overall material. In fact, I'm willing to bet that he's not going to be taken in the first round. Whether or not, and when I mentioned that he's not going to be in the CFL, I meant like he's not going to be in the CFL in the foreseeable future. Just like you said, I think he's down there 3 years, and if he gets an opportunity and he gels at it, then there's a very good chance. Now, I don't think that there's going to be a team that is going to take him in the first round, because I think that there's a lot. We give GMs in any sport, we give them the gears for making stupid decisions, but I feel that the CFL GMs are smart enough to not take a guy in the first round when they can find an even impact player who can be available to them in 2025 and 2026. The next discussion would be who is going to end up taking him, because I have a feeling he's going to be one of those picks that drop down to the third, fourth round tops. I think that's where he's going to be picked and somewhere within the third and fourth. And I think it's going to be a team that has him for the sake of trading his rights as opposed to using it. And I'm thinking that's Edmonton and Toronto. I think Edmonton and Toronto are going to be making that pick just to have his rights to trade him in the near future. So I think, those two teams seem to be those, the way that they run, their assets like that. So that's my prediction. Winnipeg actually would be, if they had some kind of semblance that he was going to be available, not a bad pick, knowing that Collaros is going to be, he is his, let's call it spade a spade. This is probably his last year. Not a bad pick if you can get any iota of information that indicates that he's going to be coming up north in 2026 and even 2027, because you can afford to have a bad year without a quarterback in 2026 after the run that you had after post Collaros. Because after Collaros, what's available in free agency, I don't know if there's a starting quarterback available for you outside of Drew Brown, and that option was taken away. I think is there anything else? Because I think we've planned a show, and I think we've talked a lot more than we kind of planned for. Anything else you want to add about that?
Just more of a shout out for the area that I'm in. Brooks, Alberta product, as you assume I pronounced it correctly, want to pronounce correctly. Saskatchewan Roughriders receiver let go. There's some NFL interest there, and I mean, he wasn't one of the kids I would have coached when I was coaching Pee Wee football when I was living in Brooks, but I still do have a lot of attachment to that community, and to see someone from this area, I wish him luck with his Edmonton or with his NFL pursuits, because believe it or not, despite how not pro NFL I am, I do not hate the league. Some people won't believe that. They probably think I genuinely despise the NFL, but I'm just not afraid to criticize it. And either way, if someone's going there, best of luck to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my final thought. Good luck to him.
Signed with the Indianapolis Colts. So a lot of us, very, very well down to earth individuals. So the Indianapolis Colts in the NFL are getting a good one.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for the Rouge Radio podcast, powered by the Canadian Football Podcast Network. This is episode 512. I'm sorry, 516. You can follow us on Twitter and as well as Blue Sky at Rouge Radio. You can follow us, myself at Rouge Dalts and Tony at Tony Rouge. This will be uploaded onto YouTube soon. Feel to leave us a review on any podcast application. For Tony, I'm Dalts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.